It's me again. Wow. So the last video had a lot of responses to it, and I made a point not to check things during the day. I went into work. Obviously, I'm on California time, so I went into work a little after 8, maybe 9 o'clock, whatever time it was. Got back for lunch, read a few of the comments, and then headed back out. Been dealing with kids, and then I took some time right now after we put the kids to bed to read through the comments, reply to a bunch of them. There were a few of them I couldn't find on my desktop, but I found them on my phone, so I didn't respond to them yet. Um, I appreciate the feedback. I really do. I'm listening to what you're saying. Um, but let me give you another perspective. Let me give you just a little bit of what is going on, what has happened in my heart through the last few years. For those of you who don't know, I taught at Calvary for 7 years, and then I decided to move to California to start working at a camp full time. Um, I'm not saying that my time at Calvary was not without hurt. I've already explained some of that. I'm not going to get into details because again, they're not necessary. But as I came out here to California, I got involved in a ministry with a super close friend of mine. We've worked together for years. I came out to help him, and let me just tell you a little bit about why the bitterness issue, like why that word comes up a whole lot with me. And maybe it's not a struggle for you, but for me personally, I have struggled really hard with bitterness, and I just wanted to take a moment and I wanted to explain a little bit of where I'm coming from. I want to explain some of the verses, some of the scriptures that I would go to, and just I'm going to challenge you to examine yourselves. I know pretty much everyone is saying, I'm not bitter, I'm just hurt. That's fine. In fact, hurt is the inevitable result of people interacting with one another. That's what happens. Mankind is sinful. No matter who you are, you're sinful. You have a wicked heart. The idea of depravity means that there's no part of your being that has not been touched by the effects of sin. So we're selfish. We look out for number one. We crave comfort. We crave pleasure. I mean, that's just something that we as humans do. And so um, it's it is inevitable that we are going to hurt one another. I'm not downplaying that at all. Please, whatever you get out of this, please do not take it that I am making light of hurt. In fact, as I go through these accounts, I want you to think about hurt and how it is dealt with. And so I came out here to California. I took on a program position. I was the program director, which meant I got to plan all the custom camps. It meant I was going to be in charge of the teen camp during the summer. I planned youth rally. That was just a lot of stuff that was now mine. I jumped into it. I was kind of out of my gourd. I didn't quite know what I was doing. And in about 2 months, the guy who was in charge of the college program here got in touch with me and said, "Hey, we're leaving. They're moving away." And long story short, if you care, I had been offered that position, and I had chosen not to take it on the advice of pastor and just other things, and now is being offered to me again. And so I had a choice. Well, long, multiple year story short, I ended up taking over the college program. I ended up moving out of and back into program. There was just a lot of really weird things that happened over the course of that year. In trying to do my job, there were times where I would accidentally step into other people's areas, and I had some people get upset with me. There were other times where I just felt like I was being judged or felt like I was being taken advantage of or looked down on. And there were just a lot of little issues. And then the one that really hurt the worst is as I was trying to keep this college program going, um, you don't need to know all the details. They don't really matter. But the college program fell out from underneath me pretty much. There were a few situations where students could no longer come back. And just the long story short is the thing I had worked so hard to build, the thing I had worked so hard at, just collapsed. And so there were interpersonal issues, there was work issues. Um, I don't remember if it was exactly along those times, having trouble with kids situation. Those of you who know the birth story of Drake, maybe I'll share it at some other time. It was rather traumatic. Um, and all of these built, and I remember having to wake up every morning, and it was almost like this mantra that I would have to go through. I have a sermon on YouTube if you want to look it up. It's called Thoughtful Thankfulness, and it's this sermon that basically I wrote in the midst of this issue, and it's the idea of how do you stay thankful in the midst of something that you're getting very upset over. And as I pushed and I pushed and I pushed and I tried to work my way through this situation, and I realize I'm being vague, but that's on purpose. As I worked my way through this situation, I knew bitterness was like right there, and I was trying my best to find it and dig it up. But I remember there was one Christmas break where every day I had to wake up and intentionally not be angry about the stuff that was going on. And it was things that were being said about me, and there were things that were being done, and there was just a whole world of issues that again, I wish I could give more detail. I feel like that would add more credibility to what I'm trying to say, but it doesn't matter. And it wasn't until I watched another ministry, and there was some people that were very, very involved in that ministry. And I watched as one man did some things and acted in self-defense. At least that's how he would have claimed it. And I watched as firebombs were thrown, and it just did a number on that ministry. It did a number on the leadership. And it just kind of left us all shocked. And as I had some of that situation explained to me, I had to sit back and say, I am doing this exact same thing in the ministry that I'm serving in. I am bitter. I am a person who was hurt by authority. I am a person who was hurt by peers. I'm a person who's hurt by circumstances. I'm a person who was bad-mouthed, and all of that is justifiable reason to feel hurt. But I had allowed it to sink in deep, and I had allowed it to affect my worldview, and I had allowed it to taint me. And I realized that I was just a few months behind, and I was well on my way to becoming that person, and I was well on my way to throwing a firebomb behind me and walking out the door and causing a world of hurt. We need to understand that because we are sinful people, we are going to hurt other people. Ultimately, God is the judge. I appreciated some of what people said, where they said that God is going to be the judge of this situation. But what I want to do in the midst of these discussions is I want to bring us back to Scripture, because we don't get to define what bitterness is. We don't get to define how we react to hurt. As we go through, and I'm hoping over the next few days and maybe weeks to take a few minutes a night, if I can, and just present another scripture passage or present another side, and maybe I'll address some of the comments that were made. But tonight I want to start with the account of Joseph. Please don't tune me out. I know you've heard it a million times. I know when it comes to Bible stories that talk about hurt people, you probably have heard this a million times and you don't want to hear it again, but please bear with me. Let me explain. So in the text, Genesis chapter 37, it talks and it says, and Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. And it goes through some of the generations of what happened. Now Joseph, he's given a bad rap by some people. I'm not going to get into that, but I want you to listen to this story. It says, and Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told his brethren, and they hated him even the more. And they said unto him, hear, I pray thee, the dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in a field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves bowed down round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said unto him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed another dream, and he told it to his brethren, and he said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come and bow down ourselves to thee in the earth? And his brethren envied him, and his father observed the saying, and his brethren went to feed at their father's flock in Shechem. Now, at this point in the context, I want to remind you of his brethren. His brothers slaughtered a village just a chapter or two before this point. Okay, so his brothers are not good guys. Okay, they're liars, they're deceivers, they're just bad people. And his father is sending him to go check on these guys because the father doesn't want them to get in that type of trouble again. And look what happens. He says in verse 14, Go, I pray thee, see whether it will be with thy brethren and with thy flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out to the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and a man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he says, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where do they feed their flocks? And the man said, They are departed hence, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren, and he found them in Dothan. So here's Joseph. He's just doing what he's supposed to do. He knows his brother's reputation. He knows this is probably not going to be the best thing. And he's just doing what he's supposed to do. He goes down. He's minding his own business. In fact, Joseph, just as an interesting little tidbit here, Joseph is the one of two men, other than Jesus, obviously, in the Bible who have no sin mentioned about them. So we are presented a man of just a paragon of spirituality here. And he's going down, and look what happens. Verse 19, they see him coming afar off, they conspire against him, and they say, Behold, the dreamer cometh. So they're making fun of him right off the bat. Those of us who are in high school, you understand what it means to be made fun of, okay? The stories of teachers making fun of you, yes, got it, I lived it, all right? I could tell you stories, doesn't matter, okay? But look what happens. It says, Behold, his dreamer cometh. Come now, let us slay him and cast him into some pit, and we will say some evil beast has devoured him, and we shall see what becomes of his dreams. Reuben heard it, so one of his brothers, and he delivered him out of his hands, and he said, Let us not kill him. So one brother of all of them stick up for him. All these brothers. Now, I want you to pay attention to this one fact, okay? I'm building to a point here. Thank you for sticking with me. Hopefully this isn't like boring as all get out. Pay attention. In the next chapter, we don't have time to read it, but read it on your own. Look at Judah. He is a scumbag, okay? Living a life of adultery. He commits adultery with his own daughter-in-law, and then he plays the spiritual card and tries to have her I mean, you want to talk about a super spiritual Pharisee type guy who was living in wicked sin and trying to play spiritual. Judah, okay? But look at Joseph. Joseph is sent down to Egypt. God is with him. That's the thing. If you're living right, God will be with you. He will help you through this situation. Okay, I'm not trivializing the hurt. I'm saying God will help you in this situation. God was there with Joseph, helped Joseph not become a bitter, upset person. Okay, I'm sure this was not easy on him. But he goes down into Egypt. He goes into basically slavery and servitude. And the whole next chapter lays a groundwork for Judah, because Judah is actually going to be the one that is protected because of what Joseph is doing. I'll build to that point in just a moment. But if we skip to Genesis chapter 39, it says, And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, the officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him off the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he made all that he had to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. And he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put in his hand. And it came to pass, from time to time, as he made him overseer in his house, and over all he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand. He knew not what he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. And so Joseph has gone through the ringer. Okay, he's been betrayed by his family. He's been sold into slavery. He's now down in Egypt, and God blesses him. And so Joseph could come out this other side saying, "Ooh, things are good." But look what happens. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph and said, "Lie with me." He refused. And his master's wife said, "Behold, my master knows not what is with me in the house. He has committed all in my hand. There is none greater than I, neither has he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not to her, to lie by her, or to be with her. And he's doing what's right. Okay? He is a man who is striving everything he can do just to do what's right. But look what happens. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into his house to do his business. There was none of the men of the house there within, and she caught him by his garments, saying, Lie with me. He left his garments in her hand and fled and got out. So again, just doing what's right, just sticking with the stuff. Again, no sin at all mentioned in this situation, but here's a man who's doing nothing but right, and he's constantly being stabbed by the pointy end of man's depravity. First, it's his brothers who are envious of him. It's his dad who says, How dare you say this? Now it's his master's wife. And look what happens. She lies about him. And it came to pass when she saw he had left his garment with her and fled forth, she called unto the men of the house and spake unto them, saying, See, he has brought a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And so here's lies being told. This may get me in trouble. But one of a biblical principle I'm going to ask you guys to apply in all of this Calvary situation. Do not take up the offense of another person. Look in the Bible, study out that topic of taking up someone else's offense. Do not do it. You can stand up for the defenseless, you can stand up for the thing. But my fear, and I can't confirm this, but my fear is that there's a lot of rumor, there's a lot of gossip, there's a lot of picking up stories from other people. And I would just challenge you, please, deal with your own hurt. If you have a confidant, deal with that. Yes, settle, get justice. Be very, very careful. I see hurt people. I see people who take up other people's offense. Be very, very careful. This woman spread this rumor about Joseph, and now he's thrown in jail. Now look what happens. He's thrown in jail. He lives in jail for a while. And then what happens? He goes to prison, and he's betrayed again. And he comes out, and he does all this good stuff. And I want to hop to the end of the book because he forgives his brothers. In fact, there's a book, I mentioned it earlier. If you can find the book, it's called Your Reactions Are Showing. Read it. We are not responsible for the hurt that's done to us. We are not responsible for the wrongdoing that other people, but we are responsible for our responses. I know that sounds trite, but it's true. We have got to respond properly to the situations. Tomorrow, Lord willing, or sometime this weekend, I'm going to dig into what the root of bitterness actually means. There's a biblical meaning to that phrase, and I believe it's extremely important. I just caution you. I caution you deeply before you cast aspersions at a ministry, before you condemn people, before you F people off. Please, 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 if you are a Christian, listen and think about some of that stuff. Okay, and I'll get into that in another day. But I want to finish off this chapter because Joseph's brothers come up to Joseph, and they are afraid that now that their dad is dead, that Joseph is going to get his vengeance. And Joseph says this really important passage, and I don't have a physical Bible on me. I'm clicking through on the computer. But they come to Joseph and they all start pleading with him and basically saying, "Oh, let your servants live in your sight. Oh, forgive us for what we've done." And I'm here. Actually, went too far. This is live video, so sorry. And if you have a Bible, turn there and look. It's Genesis chapter 50. And Joseph's father is dead. Joseph has been wronged. 7 ways to Sunday. Other than maybe David and Jesus, you don't have someone who's been wronged as deeply as Joseph has. Okay? Any story that you could come up with for harm that's been done to you, Jesus, David, and Joseph, those 3 men went through it, probably, or at least something close to it. But look what happens here at the end of Joseph's life. The end of Joseph's life, again, we're looking at Genesis chapter 50, verse 15. And it says, when Joseph's brethren saw their father was dead, they said, Joseph will peradventure hate us. So they're still worried that Joseph hasn't really forgiven them. He will peradventure hate us, and will certainly requite us the evil that which we did unto him. And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, Thy father did command before he was saying. So they're trying to bring up dad's words to try to appease Joseph. So shall you say to Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren, and their sin, For they did unto thee evil, and now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph wept when they spake unto him. Here's the truth about forgiveness, and I've had to think about this a lot in my life. You really can't forgive someone who has not yet apologized. Forgiveness is really something that, like, when someone apologizes, we should have a spirit of forgiveness no matter who it is that hurt us. But I believe we should have a spirit of forgiveness. We should have an attitude that no matter how badly that person has hurt us, we can forgive them. And forgiveness, really what it is it's taking the debt that they owe. It's taking the justice that you so strongly want, and it's taking that justice and that hurt, and it's turning it over to God and saying, God, you take care of this. I'm not going. The Bible says, vengeance is mine, I will repay. And forgiveness is taking that vengeance, taking that hurt, and it's handing it to God and saying, God, you take care of this. And if there's a confrontation that needs to be made, you make that confrontation. But forgiveness, or that attitude of forgiveness, does not badmouth other people. It doesn't tear people down. It is a release to say, I'm leaving this in the hands of someone else. And I can tell you the many times I've had to forgive people who hurt me really, really badly throughout my life. I am in a good enough relationship with them now that I can talk with them. Forgiveness does not mean you suddenly go back to trusting them. I like to think about forgiveness as returning to square one. It's like you just met that person again. And so, if somebody's abused you, obviously you're not alone with them. Or if somebody has abused a family member, you're not letting them into your house, just as you wouldn't let a stranger into your house. It's returning them back to that square one if they have asked for forgiveness. But it is hard to forgive someone who has not asked, admittedly. But in this situation, there is a person who has asked for forgiveness. Look what happens. They say, forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren. And Joseph starts crying. And this leads into what I'm going to talk about in a future day. This idea of what the root of bitterness actually means. Okay, it comes from the Old Testament. It's a Jewish phrase. But look what Joseph says. Joseph weeps, verse 18. And his brethren also went and fell down before his face, and they said, behold, we are thy servants. And Joseph said unto them, fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, ye thought evil against me. So in this situation, Joseph is pointing out their heart, which is, you truly sought to do me wrong. You truly sought to do me hurt. You added the vindictiveness of your soul, thought up an evil thing. You tried to kill me. You sold me into slavery. All of this is your fault. But look what he says. Am I in the place of God? As for you, ye thought evil against me. But God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. You know what's amazing? And this is where I'm getting at. There was a sermon I heard of years ago, and it was called Build Your Goshen. You know who God blessed in this whole situation? I mean, of course he blessed Joseph. But you know what this whole situation was set up for? This entire situation was set up so that the children of Israel would have a safe place to go. So Judah would come out on top. And eventually, the promised Messiah would come through the line of Judah. Wouldn't come through Joseph. Judah, the scumbag from the previous chapter, who realized the error of his ways, and he repented, and he got right. And Judah went from, in one chapter, being the guy who was part of the conspiracy to kill Joseph and sell him into slavery and all that rot, to being the guy who was willing to put his own neck on the line to save a brother. And that's how Joseph knew Judah had truly repented. And all of this whole situation was God's way of preparing Israel for really everything they were about to go through. All of this evil, all of this wickedness. And that's why Joseph could say in verse 20, you thought evil against me, but God meant it to good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now therefore fear ye not, I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt in his father's house, and he lived 110 years. Guys, if you've made it this far in the video, and I hope you have, I hope you've listened. take the hurt that was done, approach the situation with a spirit of forgiveness, and take this situation, and instead of using it to rip down a ministry, apply this experience to your heart to make sure you don't do this to someone else. Some of the very people I see making comments are some of the very people who have hurt me deeply, and they don't even know it. Some of the very people who talk about the careless, calloused words and the actions and how terrible it is, some of them are the very people who have said things that have hurt me to the core. We need to realize that the very thing we condemn others for, we ourselves do. We may look at someone else and say, I can't believe you said that about me. And we don't understand that we've said the same thing. If you get a chance, read through the book of Ecclesiastes. But in the book of Ecclesiastes, there's one passage that I reference almost every time I preach. It's just ingrained in me. I don't have it memorized perfectly, but it's in the end of Ecclesiastes chapter 7. And in the end of Ecclesiastes chapter 7, you know what? Give me 30 seconds and let me pull it up. But in the end of Ecclesiastes chapter 7, Solomon is talking, and he goes through a huge list of different things. But all of you who are hurt, take note of this verse. It says this, verse 20. For there is not a good man upon earth that doeth good and sinneth not. That's a conviction to every one of us. But look at the next passage. Also, take no heed unto all the words that are spoken, lest thou hear thy servant curse thee. There are statements that are made. There are comments that are made in passing. I know I made them as a teacher. If I can reference it, Pat, you would appreciate this. Remember this stupid hot dog with "this is all that remains of your husband"? Okay, that stupid comment I made totally did not mean anything bad by it. Came across completely wrong. Okay, so if I can use an illustration that's silly, it's this type of situation. Don't pay attention to every single word you hear, because you're going to start hearing people curse you. You're going to start hearing people say bad things about you. Sometimes they really are. Okay, so Felicia, the one little comment that you don't remember anymore, which great, I'm glad. But I was commenting on something you were doing, and you were on the other side of the door, and I got confronted on it, and I was like, that was wrong, and that's why I came and apologized. But there are times where we ascribe motives or we ascribe things that weren't ever meant. So that's why this verse says, again, take no heed unto all the words that are spoken, lest you hear your servant curse thee. But look what it says. For oftentimes also thine own heart knoweth that thou likewise have also cursed others. So we looked at the life of Joseph. We've looked at some of these passages. And so I would encourage you, please, take the hurt that's been done, internalize it if you must, okay? Have a spirit of forgiveness toward the people who did this wrong, even if they've never apologized, because a lot of times they don't know what they did. And I appreciate the students who have confronted me over the years and said, I feel like you did this. And I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't know. But I would challenge you to take this situation with a spirit of forgiveness and think about how you are going to counsel someone in the future when they are hurt. What advice are you going to give them? That has been a saving grace in my own life. Thank you guys. I appreciate the time you've taken to listen through this. I know it's been about a half an hour. I apparently have two settings, off and dispense all knowledge, just like Pastor Joe. If there's anything I can do to help, if there was hurt done, if there's things I need to make right, okay, comment. But if there is something I can do, I see some very, very deep hurt being brought up in my previous video. I love you guys. You are my classmates. Some of you are my students. Some of you, I don't know where you came from. I'm just kidding. I want to be a help. Let's heal. Okay, let's move on. Let's make this right. If you are saved, you are a servant of God. You have things expected of you, and we can't sit in a rut, bashing and tearing. Okay, we have got to move on. Doesn't mean things don't need to be made right. But again, spirit of forgiveness, moving forward, serving the cause of Christ. That's where we have to go from here. But again, look at the life of Joseph. We'll look at some other things going forward in the future. I appreciate, again, the time you guys have taken. It's been a half an hour. I killed another minute, so therefore it's been 30 minutes. Appreciate it. If you guys have any comments, please let me know. If there's things you don't want to share on the Facebook, by all means, please send me a private message. I will try to answer it. If you want me to comment on air about it, then yes, I can make an episode and I can answer questions. But I can't answer all the hurt because I don't know all the situations. But I know some of them. Thank you guys. If there's prayer requests, if there's anything I can do to help, please just let me know. And hope you guys are doing well.